I got told a lot by teachers that I wouldn't fit into normal corporate life. I got told that I was either going to end up in prison, dead, or a really successful millionaire.
Charles is a very influential marketer who really thinks outside the box. He took those negative words and he used them to create multiple successful businesses.
I'm doing a lot of SaaS, like I said. I keep on just saying SaaS. I own Parasite SEO.com, Couple.ai, Topical and a couple other tools with some other people. And I'm really trying to integrate AI as much as I can into the workflows of everyday things.
One uncommon SEO tactic that a lot of SEOs overlook is the architecture of your website. And using tools like Charles has created to do topical mapping of your website could be a game changer.
We have multiple mapping tools within one. So the function that we would talk about is SEO maps, but we've also got product idea maps, we've got social mapping, and we have question mapping as well.
Another uncommon SEO tactic that a lot of SEOs shy away from is Parasite SEO.
Parasite SEO as a whole is effectively using other people's domain names that have got very high authority that allow you to either build or buy hosts or microsites on their domains.
So listen into this episode as I talk with Charles about uncommon SEO tactics, as well as specific characteristics that Charles believes SEOs need to have to survive in this ever-changing digital world.
It's a pretty worrying time, I think, for a lot of people in SEO. And I would always just go back to adaptability and diversification. Those should be the main two strengths of any SEO.
In today's episode, we're joined by Charles Floate. Charles started his digital marketing career at the age of 12 years old. Since then, he has become one of the leading SEO experts in the world. He's not just a whiz at navigating the complex world of search engines, he's a seasoned entrepreneur who has sold 2 agencies and numerous websites over the years. Charles is the brain behind Charles Floate Training and co-founder of SEO.careers. He also manages the e-commerce and digital marketing for his family's business, currently valued at over $70 million. Known for his deep SEO knowledge and creative ways of thinking outside the box, Charles takes pride in giving free SEO advice to tens of thousands of people across multiple platforms like YouTube and LinkedIn. Currently, Charles is focusing on expanding his digital marketing training programs. He's dedicated to keeping up with the latest in SEO, specifically the integration of AI-driven strategies and the ever-important Google algorithm updates. A firm believer in the power of continuous learning, Charles often shares that adapting to change is key in the fast-paced world of digital marketing. Join us today as we dive deep into the insights and experiences of a true digital marketer as we talk through uncommon SEO tactics that still work. Welcome to the show, Charles.
I appreciate you having me. That was an amazing introduction, Eli.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. Really, the introduction is, it's all true. Like, if anybody just goes to your YouTube channel or your LinkedIn channel, like, I probably left out a lot because you have accomplished so much in this digital world that we could probably talk about that for quite some time. But man, I really appreciate you jumping on. I'll be honest, when I reached out to you the first time, I thought, this guy's way too like famous in this world to accept an invitation from just like me to get on this podcast. So when you responded, I was like, man, this is going to be a good podcast. So I'm really, really grateful that you're taking the time to jump on and talk with me, especially, you know, you being in Thailand and that the time difference is 10 o'clock your time. So staying up a little bit later to talk. I really appreciate you taking the time today for sure.
Yeah, no worries at all, honestly. Like, I really appreciate you having me, and I'm looking forward to the episode as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive in. So first and foremost, let's learn a little bit about who Charles is. So where'd you grow up? What did you want to be when you were little? And how'd you go from that to where you're currently at now and getting into the digital world?
Yeah, so I grew up in a little village outside of Birmingham in the UK, which is the second biggest city. The only thing that makes the city famous is Peaky Blinders. That's literally it.
Oh, wow.
In terms of everybody just knows about Birmingham because of Peaky Blinders, basically, because it was like the biggest TV show in the world at one point. But I grew up in a tiny village outside. We have like 10,000 people. I think now it's maybe like 30,000 people or something. It's grown quite a bit. But it was a tiny village. I didn't have much experience of like the bigger city life until I was a bit older. And I really didn't even know, I didn't really have much experience in what I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. I just had a quite entrepreneurial streak, which is a bit different to the rest of my family, because a lot of the rest of my family are very like blue and white collar jobs and stuff. My mom is somewhat entrepreneurial, but only because of reasons to do with her job and stuff, right? And then I got that entrepreneurial streak very early on. I hated high school, to be honest. I hated working for other people. I have a bit of an authority complex. So I tend to just want to do my own thing and not take instructions from other people. So I very quickly pivoted. I had a job when I was 17 as a junior SEO. And then just before I turned 18, I got a job as a head of SEO. And I was earning like $100,000 a year or something when I was 17 as head of SEO in London. But I hated that job. Like I really hated working for any other people. And 3 months after I took that job, I ended up leaving and starting my own business. And as a result of guest posting, I was the first person as well to guest post on Matthew Woodward's blog, matthewwoodward.co.uk. I think it's now Search Intelligence or something like that. But I was the first person to guest post on his blog, and that really gave me a power up in the branding world of SEO. And I started getting more consulting clients, started having a kind of reputation for myself, and that's what led me to today, where I have like training businesses. As you said, I do a lot of SaaS. I do a lot of consulting still, but for a lot bigger clients than I did when I was younger. And I have stopped speaking at conferences, but I now run my own events instead. So I've definitely done a lot of stuff in SEO, and I've kind of dabbled in and tried everything. But I think the main drivers for me are definitely consulting and SaaS these days.
Was there anything in your upbringing that made you lean towards being an entrepreneur, aside from just not liking a job? Like when you were 17, you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Or was there something early on that was like, I got to like control my own destiny?
Yeah. So in high school, I got told a lot by teachers that I wouldn't like fit in to normal corporate life. Like I wouldn't fit into normal jobs. That's what they said. I got told by like 20 different teachers that I was either going to end up in prison, dead, or a really successful millionaire. Those were my three options, basically, from most of my teachers. And,
wow.
and I genuinely think that kind of gave me a kick up the ass as well, to really just focus on the successful side of entrepreneurship from that. And again, I also thought that because those, like, I don't know if this is a great explanation, but because the teachers were like enforcing this narrative of I needed to go get a job, I needed to be successful in this job, it made me not want to do that. You know, like if somebody's continually like forcing something down your throat, it makes you want to prove them wrong, right? So I always just had that drive to kind of prove everybody wrong and try and build as much as I could, and it kind of paid off in the end, I think.
Absolutely. Have you heard of shadow work?
Yes, it's like a spiritual thing, right? Like I do a load of niche analysis and research, right? So I know about, there's actually massive niches in like astrology and like angel numbers and shadow work and like all these kind of things as well. So I know about these things. I don't know, insane knowledge about them. It's generally more so because I'm so involved in SEO. I have little bits of information about tons of niches that I've researched as a result of SEO. So my general knowledge in quizzes and stuff is actually pretty good now because I've been able to look at so many different niches and industries and stuff, right?
So my understanding of shadow work is sort of what you're doing right now, is where you use the negative as a strength, where people are like, you can't do that. And you're like, oh, yes, I can. Watch me. I'll prove you wrong. And so it's part of it, right? There's other stuff to it. It's where you look at like, well, what's the worst part of a human, and what could I potentially be? And then you flip to the opposite side. And you're like, what's the best that I could be? And it looks like you're kind of taking that. Everybody's saying you can't do that, or you have to do that. And you're like, I'm going to prove all of you wrong. So a lot of very successful entrepreneurs go through that. A lot, it's kind of like 50-50. Like you either ignore it all and you're like, I'm just going to do whatever I want, or you focus on people who are being negative towards you and you say, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I think a lot of people in sports are that way. I think a lot of people, I'm that way. I'm very competitive. Every time like I have a rough day, I think about a few people in my life who gave me advice that was similar to that. It was like, man, you should just stay in retail job, or like you're not going to make it past X, Y, and Z or whatever. And I use that as a drive, and sounds like you're really good at doing that.
Yeah, I also think to an extent, other people tend to put their own downfalls and like their own, lack of succeeding in their dreams and stuff onto you, especially when you're a kid, right? If you're a kid with all these like bright, big ideas and stuff in the world and stuff and things, a lot of adults are kind of miserable and toxic when you're like this child with all these unlimited wonder and stuff in the world, right? And I really think it's a disservice as, as adults and things to be putting children like that down. And I think that's a terrible thing that happens routinely in schools and our society. And I definitely think we should try and to encourage those people more, because they can be massively productive members of society that can be the next person to cure cancer, or the next person to invent, the person to take us to Mars or something like that. So I really do think we should encourage innovation and stuff, especially going into this age where AI kind of does all the little normal tasks for us, where I think that's it's going to be the top elite of thinkers and doers that are going to actually be the difference makers in the world.
Totally. Charles, what are you currently working on that excites you right now?
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of SaaS, like I said already. I keep on just saying SaaS. I own ParasiteSEO.com, Cuppa.ai, TopicalMap.ai, and a couple other tools with some other people. It's not just me. But I have invested and acquired several different SaaS businesses over the last year or so, specifically in SEO, but I've also been doing other non-SEO SaaS stuff throughout the years anyway. And I'm really trying, as you already said, to integrate AI as much as I can into the workflows of everyday things. So I normally try and look for problems that I have. So for example, with Topical Map AI, one of the major issues that we were having is I was either having to sit for 2 days and manually map out every single keyword in one topic just for us to make sure that we have the correct page assigned to this and the intent is matched here, and all of this absolute crazy relevancy matching and stuff like that. I don't like doing that work. I don't think anybody really does, to be fair. It's very tedious. It's very boring. And like I said, it can take 2 or 3 days for one real niche to map it out. So that was one of the first things we wanted to solve with AI. But we didn't really want to build from scratch. And again, I don't like massively building from scratch. I like going and finding other people that have had the same idea that I have had. They've come up with the same pain point, but they're already invested. They already have come up with a lot of the solutions. I don't have to do all the base level work. We can just come in and be like, okay, you have the MVP. Let's put our development team and our knowledge base into your tool, 10x, 100x what we have here, and make it the best, and also ideally the most affordable tool on the market, right?
Tell me about that tool. What does it do? So if I want to build out a topical map for my website, how does that work?
Yeah, so we have multiple mapping tools within one, right? So the function that we would talk about is SEO maps, but we've also got product idea maps, we've got social mapping, and we have question mapping as well. And we also do clustering, which is another thing. But the main thing that you would do is you would input your keyword, you would choose whichever model you want to use. You would choose if you want to connect to the additional entity APIs, Google search. You can choose if you want to edit subtopics, cluster, choose how many topics you want, all of these kind of things. And then the tool will literally, from one seed keyword, it will spit out an entire CSV, or within the actual dashboard, you'll get a format as well. But to make it easier, you'll get an entire CSV output that matches your current site structure. And it tells you need to build these pages to match and fulfill this topic, right? So let's say, for example, with electric bikes, I put electric bikes in the other day. It came up with this specific site that we input. We'd covered most of the stuff about electric bikes, right? But what the tool came up with, which is really, really interesting, is we hadn't covered the specific brands of electric bikes. So there's like Harley Davidson, Livewire, there's a couple other really big electric motorbike brands. And we actually hadn't talked about those brands. We hadn't reviewed the models. We hadn't talked about any specifications. We hadn't done any of that. And it turned out that was like half the niche, right? Like that was half the traffic potential. It was so much, right? And if you start looking at some of the earning potential when you start scaling up to niches you didn't even consider on your own, because AI goes and finds those gaps that you overlook and it does it so fast that it's unbelievable, right? And then normally what I do is I take that workflow and we've tried to create multiple tools that you can use as a stack, essentially. So we also own Cuppa. So Cuppa is the content creation suite, and Cuppa V2 is about to go live, where we're going to essentially compete with Jasper, but on a bigger level, hopefully. And you don't have to pay for credits. Everything is just you put in your own API keys. If you want to generate 10 million words, you can generate 10 million words. It's just going to cost you the API costs. It's not going to cost you. I think if you're generating 10 million words with Jasper on their credit scheme, it costs you like $25,000 or something. In API,
Wow.
it's actually pretty insane. In API fees, it would probably be $800 to maybe $1,200, depending on what model you're using. So you're talking a gigantic saving if you actually move over to stuff like this, right? But again, we're trying to build stuff that is integrated workflows, so that every tool that we either acquire or that we build out backs up another tool that we already have, and then it can hopefully be kind of one big cycle.
Man, that's brilliant. I want to dig into a little bit more just because I'm nerdy and I kind of want to know how it works. So like the topical map one, does the AI go and crawl the search engines and looks at what's ranking and what pages they have, and then pulls it all back, compiles it, and says like, here is the best topical map based on that keyword? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, 100%. So with Topical Map AI, we are currently in a position where, depending on your input, depends on your output, right? So we operate Topical Map AI as a credit system, because otherwise you can't really get individual maps because they're all different and everything's unique. And generally speaking, depending on how you input is if you get access to search, if you get access to entities, if you get all that kind of stuff. But you can have everything, right? We've tried to plug in as much data as possible into the tool so that you can literally get search, you get everything. We build almost all of our tools are in Next.js. So it'll be React and Node. And then we have developers that we generally try and onboard that can do both the React for the UX and the Node for the backend. And then we can just plug in APIs and test different formats, test prompting, test all of this kind of stuff. But Topical Map AI, again, massively depends on if you're inputting your language, country, if you want search engines, if you want relevancy metrics, if you want search volumes, if you want all of this kind of stuff. You can set literally whichever filters you want to get out of it.
That's amazing. I love the see a need, fill a need thing where you're like, man, I'm having this problem. I'm sure other people are. You find those people, you combine your knowledge, those skills, the technology. Man, I think it's brilliant what you're doing. I want to dive into some of the other stuff you're doing, like the Parasite SEO, and that's really kind of some of the stuff we were going to talk about in the tactical section. So if we just jump into that, tell me about. I think at a high level, first of all, I think there's probably a different level of audience that's listening to this. I think there are some people who have been in the industry for a long time. I think there are some business owners who have never heard about SEO. Maybe they've heard about it, but don't know how to do it right. And there's probably some junior level SEOs who are listening to sort of just like get different perspectives and elevate themselves a little bit in the world. So maybe at a high level first, explain what Parasite SEO is, and then let's dive into your tool and what it actually does and how it could potentially help some of the listeners.
Yeah, 100%. So Parasite SEO as a whole is effectively using other people's domain names that have got very high authority that allow you to either build or buy posts or microsites on their domains. So free Parasite sites, you have things like Reddit and LinkedIn posts, Medium and stuff like that. But then you have gigantic sites that you can buy Parasite pages on, all the way up to things like Forbes or CNN News, for example, right? You can actually buy sponsored editorials on those sites. The reason it works is because Google favors link authority and certain specific signals to such a degree that you can effectively exploit the fact that they favor those signals and then create pages on these huge sites. And because Google favor those signals, they just go and rank for basically any keyword. And again, this idea of like topical authority and niche relevancy and things kind of gets thrown out the window when you start dealing with these level of sites, because they truly are like generic authorities. They will rank for effectively anything. And Google has, over the last couple of years, just moved more and more and more towards link authority, more and more towards UGC signals, all of these things that effectively are used by Parasite SEO. So Parasite SEO has just gotten more and more powerful as a result of the actions that Google has taken. So Google actually did do a spam reputation abuse policy announcement in March of this year, and then they implemented it in May. However, in an interview a few days ago, Danny Sullivan, who's a search liaison for Google, he said that whilst that specific update was supposed to target Parasite SEO, they never actually implemented the algorithmic side of it. So they only ever manually emailed and manually removed certain sites that were abusing Parasite SEO from the SERPs. So algorithmically, nothing was ever done to stop it. It was just manual sites that had received actions against them. And as a result, it was only those group of sites that got hit. Every other site that was using it was still thriving.
So it sounds like, if they came out with an announcement in March, it sounds like it could be potentially risky. Is there a way to make it less risky, or do you encourage people to continue doing it just the way they're doing it, and in the future Google's probably not going to do anything? Or is there a way to use it in a way that can protect people who are using it also?
Yeah, so the only real risk, there is two levels of risk, right?
Okay.
The first one is financial, but there's always a financial risk to any investment that you're really making with marketing, with SEO, anything, right? The financial risk is that it doesn't work and that you don't make your ROI, right? But that also you can put that into basically anything to do with business, anything to do with investments, anything, right? The second risk is if you're linking to your own domain name. So we never ever recommend that you link to your own domain name, because that's when Google can penalize your site, because you're effectively promoting your brand through links that are manipulating PageRank and manipulating Google Rank. And as a result, Google can remove those pages. And because when they remove those pages, your site can be hit at the same time. You can offset that a little bit by making it seem like an affiliate promoted your site. So instead of directly linking to your site, you just get an affiliate link. And in some cases, you don't even have an affiliate program. We just pretend it's an affiliate code that redirects to the same site, that redirects to the same page. And you use that instead. So that kind of lets you have this ability to kind of remove there's a word that I'm missing here, which is the key thing here, but it gives you that reasonable deniability, right? What's the specific word for that? It kind of gives you plausible deniability around that specific thing. And if you go down that route, you shouldn't ever get penalized. So there is no level of risk, right, for your own site if you go down that specific route. In other forms of SEO, there is risk for basically everything, right? You could build a guest blog, you could build a blog post, you could do anything, and Google could penalize you for it. And even as a result of helpful content update last year, we saw some very solid expert level niche blogs go from 100,000 visitors a month to less than 1,000. And there was no real reason. Like the sites were good. They're by people who are experts in their industry. They've put a lot of effort and time into their sites and things. It's just that Google replaced them with questionable sites, mostly Reddit and Forbes and things like that. And there's all these conspiracy theories around why they did that. I won't get into that. I don't really like politics too much. Okay. But I believe that if you do Parasite SEO properly, there shouldn't be any proper risk. And if you can start by using free parasites in your process and building up to paid ones, then there shouldn't really be a financial risk either, because you can earn capital from free parasites, which just takes your time. And you can use things like ChatGPT to start generating content and things for you as well, which is free as well. GPT-4o is free. And then you essentially build your capital up from the commissions or the traffic or whatever that you're generating through those free parasite pages that you're ranking. And then with that commissions and that earnings, you invest that into paid parasites and you build this cycle that is kind of a guaranteed ROI system.
Okay, so maybe I'm just a little bit confused on this. So dig in just a little bit more. When you say the way to avert some of the risk is to not link back to your site. So where do you link and how does that help your site?
Yeah, so number one, it would depend on what you're promoting, right? So if you're a standard independent SEO consultant, you can just promote affiliate links. So you never need to actually link to any of your own properties because you're just promoting somebody else's offer and you're getting commission as a result of doing that. If you're wanting to promote your own brand, for example, right? For e-commerce, let's say, you could do best X in 2024 page, rank it and just have your brand number one, your competitors number two, number three, maybe even, some industries and some people like to create multiple brands within the same niche, just so that they can start controlling more SERP realty and have diversification and things like that. You can then start putting yourself number one, number two, number three, realistically, if you want to, so that you're always getting the kind of sale and leads and traffic and stuff, right? If you're trying to directly promote a service offering, trying to get leads, things like that, that's very dependent on what type of thing you are generating. And even then, a lot of the time you can link to like a Google form, or you can link to something where you can generate that lead without ever having to link to your own website a lot of the time.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, Tell me about some other maybe lesser known or uncommon SEO tactics that can help your brand or rank your website.
Yeah, so lesser known ones. So I would say there's two sides to this, right?
Okay.
There are lesser known ones that people actually just don't know about, right? And there are ones that people know about, but they don't know how effective they are, or that they underrate how effective they are, right?
Yeah.
So I would say in this category of things that are very well known that people underrate, you have things like internal linking, you have things like schema, meta title optimization. I speak to so many agency owners and so many e-commerce owners and things like that say, well, what we're going to do is we're going to do the links, we're going to do the socials, we're going to do the site, and then once it's ranking, we're going to update the content, we're going to do all this and stuff. Like, that's not really how it works.
Yeah.
You need to have that holistic approach initially for it to get the maximum success. And if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then you're limiting the success of that overall campaign from the beginning. And Google wants you to have as high a quality score as a baseline as possible from the moment you get indexed, which is another whole technical kind of spiel thing we can go down.
Yeah.
Other things when it comes to underrated or unknown tactics, right? There are loads of them. It's just very dependent on what you're doing, right? So in local, for example, there's a bunch of tricks that you can do in like GMPs and reviews and things like that. And then there's actually some local sites that rank very well for Parasite, right? So for example, TripAdvisor ranks very well for restaurant and hotel keywords, and you can manipulate TripAdvisor, right? So if you are, for example, best restaurant in Dallas or best restaurant in New York, normally TripAdvisor is number one, maybe number two, number three, somewhere around that. That page is probably getting 10,000, maybe hundreds of thousands of visitors per month. You can manipulate yourself to be number one for that and then get the traffic from there, right? So there's all these kind of under the table things. With reviews, actually, there's a lot of tactics and things that people don't even know about. Okay. So with Trustpilot, for example, if you buy Trustpilot Pro, you can import reviews from other platforms, right? So you could import your reviews from Google reviews. You could import your reviews from Facebook reviews, things like that. You can also import your reviews from Google reviews as a sheet that you export from Google reviews, right?
Yeah.
Well, you export that sheet from Google reviews, and then you just go into the sheet and add new lines of fake reviews that you want to add to Trustpilot, import that sheet, and now you have got as many fake reviews on Trustpilot as you want. And your Trustpilot score goes from, 3.2 to like 4.9 or something like that. So you can manipulate Trustpilot as well. There's loads of things that you can do for local, which is that if you find these little hacks, it's really easy. There's also things around like GMPs where you don't even need an address. You know that? You don't even need an address to get a GMP listed in a city. So there's certain cities where I know local SEOs have got 20 different GMP profiles for the same business, just spread out across the city, perfectly within different 1 kilometer square radiuses of each other, so that they're getting as much traffic and generation as possible on all these different listings spread out across the proximity of the city. With local, like I said, there's just an unlimited number of things that we could talk about, and I don't even do local. So yeah, there's literally just so many tricks and stuff in that book. With everything else, I would say generally there are some unknown ones around the types of schema that Google's using. They're constantly updating the types of schema. Generally, it's like 2 to 4 new types of schema that they're accepting every year. And if you can figure out how to be some of the first people to implement that schema, generally you can get boosts, you can get SERP feature spots, you can get feature snippets easier. There's all sorts of stuff around that. And then there's also indexing stuff. So Google's indexing API, if you go onto their documentation, so you go Google indexing API, okay, and it'll come up with a page. It will say on their documentation page that you can only submit image listings and job post listings. So it's basically like if you're a recruitment company or you're a big company looking to hire, you can go and submit your job posting pages immediately so that it gets picked up by Google Jobs. But it's the same indexing function as Google search. It also says you can submit image and video objects. So that's supposed to be for like image sitemaps and video sitemaps. However, the documentation is just wrong. So it's number one, as an API, as a developer, right, having your documentation be factually incorrect is very, very bad, especially considering you're one of the top richest companies in the entire world and you can't even get your documentation right. But the reason it's wrong is that stuff about image listings and job postings, that's a complete load of nonsense. You can submit any page to Google's indexing API. So if you move sites, or if you do like with a client, you sometimes move domains, things like that. Most people don't know that you can use Google's indexing API to get your new domain indexed the same day. So you don't have to wait like weeks or months for Google to catch up with all these different URLs and stuff. You just force it into the SERP on that same day. And again, because Google's documentation is wrong, and so many people like to believe whatever Google puts out is 100% gospel and fact, people don't go down that path because they read the thing, they're like, oh, well, I can't use it. They never use it. But actually, if you just start messing around with some stuff, you figure out that a lot of this stuff isn't correct, and that actually there's some settings and there's some stuff like that allow you to do things that you can kind of get away with. And in SEO, that's just over and over and over again. It's just about doing that additional deep diving, questioning things that are in front of you, questioning documentation, that kind of stuff. And you start finding little unknown tips and stuff that people, the industry doesn't know, and are massively valuable for SEO.
Well, there's so much to dive into and dissect in what you just said. Let me let me sort of go back to the beginning where you said the known areas that maybe people aren't doing it right. So two things you mentioned I'd love for you to dig into a little bit more and explain the how. One is internal linking. I've talked a lot about internal linking on this podcast, and a lot of people say, well, it's like a one-by-one thing. You go to each page and just kind of figure out where to internal link. I've been trying to figure out a better way to do that. So yes, so please let's talk through that. And then the second thing is your title and meta description. And I know a lot of people go and optimize those, but I'd love to hear your take on how to best do that.
Yeah, so manual internal linking optimization should only ever be done when either you're trying to get a quick win. So you're like, okay, this page is number 2 and I want to get it to number 1. And there's some really strong pages that I can internally link to it, and that will probably move the needle.
Okay.
That's the main thing we're only ever taking manual internal linking for. The other side of it is, you don't really want to do any sort of automated internal linking, just because it will lead to over optimization issues, especially if you're a fairly new site or you're a low DR, low DA, anything under like DR 30, 40, you risk a lot of issues by automating internal linking, and you can have repeat links, over optimization issues, all this kind of stuff. We recommend either you use a semi-automated tool, so something like InLinks, which is absolutely fantastic by Dixon Jones, or Link Whisper, which is kind of an affiliate version of InLinks, but not quite as good, but a lot cheaper. Okay. So those would be the two semi-automated options. Or you go down the path of automating the pages that you don't necessarily care so much about, but you make the variables so that it doesn't use the same anchor text repetitively. The number one problem that you have in automated internal linking is that it uses the same anchor text for the same page over and over and over again. Let's say, I keep on using Dallas all the time. I just use Dallas as an example. I don't know why. It's like the number one default that everybody goes to for local SEO.
Yeah.
But for example, if you're a site in Dallas, right, and you put plumber Dallas or something is the keyword, how many iterations as a plumber in Dallas do you have on your site? It's probably on every single page on your site. So you've now linked with that same keyword from every single page on your site just by that one automated link. So generally speaking, we try to be very limited in how we execute automated internal linking by making sure that we have enough anchor text variables, and that it will only ever choose one of those variables. And that is the way it chooses. We have some scripts to try and prioritize based on localized authority, which is, again, we do it kind of complicated where we start sculpting page rank between pages and then figure out which pages have got the highest equity. And then we try and do the internal linking based on that, whichever anchor text variation is the most competitive, right? So the most competitive keyword we'll put on the most authoritative page. So, and vice versa. So until we go down the list to the least competitive keyword is on the least authoritative page, right? And that's kind of the strategy, is a mix of mostly automated and then doing the bigger pages more manually and making sure that the system is using enough variables and optimization between the highest authority pages and the most competitive keywords.
So what you're saying is you got to make sure that, like, if you use one anchor text, use it once in one internal link somewhere, and then there needs to be like a variation on the next page of that same one that could be going to the same URL. So when you do that, when you're manually doing this, and you're like, hey, I got this one page, I got to rank for this, keyword or cluster of keywords or whatever it is. What I've used in the past, there's other tools that you can go and look at, like domain authority and stuff. But what I've used in the past that seemed to be somewhat successful is you'll go and you'll do a site colon search with that keyword. And then Google pulls up like, hey, here are the ones that could potentially work. Is that a good recommendation on how to do that? Or do you have other ways that you could look to find manually which ones to link from?
Yeah, that works generally for the small to medium scale sites, right? When you start dealing with sites with 100,000 pages, or we start dealing with sites like millions of pages, tens of millions of pages, it's just not plausible, because certain sites will have 250 pages about the same topic, but which page is actually the page that we need to be linking to or from, right? Like that's where it starts becoming this massive issue. And that's where our system of where we page rank sculpt equity between pages makes it very easy, because then you can sort all the pages that are relevancy matched to this query, and then whichever page has got the highest equity, that's the one we're using to internally link to X, right? So it's a pretty easy system that we've developed that also takes into account that it removes the over optimization issues that a lot of internal linking has, and we're making sure that we're sending the most authority signals possible to the most competitive anchor text.
Okay. Is there a certain amount of internal links you would have like per page? So let's say I'm looking at a blog post and I want to link from that blog post somewhere else. Is 3 too many? Is 5 too many? Does it depend on how big the page is, how much content's on it? Like, walk me through that process.
It generally depends on your niche, right?
Okay.
So, and depends on how much topical content you have in your niche. The over optimization tends to more be the issue where you're repeatedly using the same anchor texts over and over again, more so than it is linking to the page. Linking to the page, you have issues with backlinks, right? So like external link building and stuff. Definitely with that. With internal links, you get away with so much more, and you can be way more aggressive than link building. So generally, Google tries not to affect you. Also, bear in mind that site navigation elements, so things like footer links, sidebar links, the actual main navigation, those don't get counted. So those are discounted by Google 100%. They don't count towards your internal link equity distribution.
Okay.
So we try to, again, just make sure that we're not over optimizing at the anchor text level. And then if we see the tool is recommending 285 pages that we need to internally link from, we're like, okay, we need a VA to go and manually see which ones we actually want from those 285, because we don't want 285 internal links. We need maybe like 28, like it's one of those. It's knowing how many you need is more SEO intuition than a science, right? Like you just kind of learn over developing campaigns and doing internal linking and stuff like that, how many a page needs. You just, like, again, it's sometimes in SEO, you just know things from intuition more than you actually can explain or knowledge stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like I do it so many times with my guys where they're like, how do you know that page is really good? And I'm like, give me an hour and I'll be able to explain. But right now I don't even really, I just know off the top of my head kind of thing. And it's one of those kind of situations.
Are there any tools out there that can, like for beginners, they can go maybe Screaming Frog or something like that, where you can do an analysis and say, here are all the internal links from for this page, or you know what I'm trying to say? Like, where does a beginner start besides just going through one page at a time? How do they know if this is a page they want to rank, how many internal links already go to it, and if that needs to be adjusted or not?
Yeah, if you've got WordPress, just buy Link Whisper, because it does everything you just said built into it. You have a dashboard within the WP admin area, and it'll say this page has got 55 internal links. Here's the internal links, anchor text, that kind of thing. And also it allows you to delete stuff. So inside that, you can just go, I want to delete this link, and it will remove it from that page, right? And stuff like that. It will also give you recommendations throughout you using it. So it will say, okay, actually, we found a new internal link opportunity. Click here to add it, kind of thing. So for beginners, by far the easiest platform.
Okay.
If you are using anything but WordPress, that's where stuff just gets more complicated, unfortunately. Sitebulb is probably the best tool for people who are starting out, like beginners to intermediates. I would say, I love Screaming Frog, don't get me wrong. It's just, if you put a new age SEO, so like somebody's like 18, 19, in front of Screaming Frog, they're like, what is this software from 1990?
Yeah.
Like,
Totally.
what is this shit?
Yeah.
Like, literally, yeah. So the kind of intuitive side of it is not really there anymore, because it's more intuitive to like the oldest generation than it is to the newer generation. So I think until they get to a point where they do a serious UX upgrade, it's just too overly complicated. You need to know exactly where a setting is. You need to know exactly where this checkbox is to get this to work and things like that. And to even learn it, you have to go through like a days long course of YouTube videos and stuff to get it in there. Sitebulb is so easy. You literally just create a new project. You can like import settings from their default templates and things like that. You don't even need to do your own settings. You can just do it from there. And then you just start getting it to crawl, and then it gives you hints. So this is the other thing that I love about Sitebulb, is I can put VAs who will make every excuse under the sun of why they can't do something, right?
Yeah.
Sitebulb shows them how to do exactly what it's showing them every single time. So if it says you've got too long meta titles here, right? They click the little hint button and it will say, this is a meta title. This is why it's too long. This is how to change it, right?
Yeah.
And for beginners, for intermediate people, that is phenomenal, right? That education ability to learn by themselves whilst they're actually using the tool is second to none, really. So I love Screaming Frog. I love Screaming Frog and I love Sitebulb. Sitebulb also has the mapping feature. So it'll actually show you I can't remember what the style is, but it's like a node style of graphing where it shows you the different nodes of pages that in turn link between each other in a mapping style graph. And that's really good as well, because then you can just start going in, you can like scroll in, look at this specific category. Okay, this specific category's pages are linked to this specific categories. Maybe we need to interlink them to this one because they're more relevant, things like that, right? So that is also really good. And it's the data visualization is awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do like Sitebulb a lot. And you're spot on with Screaming Frog. It looks so old school from like the 1990s, and yeah, you're spot on. Okay, let's dive into title and metas.
Okay, yeah. So meta titles 100% for some reason I see loads of SEOs, SEO consultants, SEO professionals, e-commerce sites, whatever. You go onto their website, their homepage is meta title is home. Right, like that's it. Right? Number one thing that's just like, okay, well, this is aggravating, and especially if you're an SEO consultant or expert or something, having your homepage meta title as home or homepage, I think it's embarrassing personally. I wouldn't do it. I really think that your meta title is literally the first crawlable text in your file. So it's the first thing that Google's crawlers pick up that they can actually understand and format into usable text as a ranking signal. Yeah. So it's literally the first thing you're showing Googlebot. Secondly, it's massively underused and undervalued. Generally speaking, most people try to make it very, very white hat, and they are using it some kind of a variation of the key page, but it's trying to do kind of a CTR boosting style. We try to incorporate the CTR boost as much as possible, but we want to use those 62 characters of realty, and they are prime realty in our opinion, to input as many keywords as possible. Those keywords are going to be formatted in a naturally sounding structure, but it's going to be prioritizing the keywords that we want to try and boost the site for, right? Yeah. And a load of people are like, oh, well, what do I change my shop's homepage to, or something like that, the title. Well, go and have a look at how many people are searching for niche store, niche shop, niche online store, right? All of these things. And you'll be pretty surprised at how many people are searching for it. And generally speaking, how little other companies have optimized for that search, right? And because it's quite generic search, if your average order value is like $2,000 or something along those lines, you're talking about like 20 to 200K a month of additional revenue. So just from one page editing the meta title, right? The level here is absolutely crazy when you start digging into it. So I really, really go to the extreme and try to really manually optimize those meta titles. And it's all based on the power of the keyword relevancy that I think that page will rank for. Again, we're trying to make the homepage rank for its own unique keywords. Too many people cannibalize the homepage with a inner page that is ranking for the same thing. With agencies, it's normally like, they're trying to rank the SEO agency in this city. Yeah. And they put their homepage for their home as we're an SEO agency in the city. And then also on inner page for SEO agency in the city. So it's just cannibalizing each other. Same for ecom, where you have like, they're selling this product and then they have a category selling the product. The homepage is targeting that product. The about page is targeting that product. They have a subcategory targeting it, and it's all just cannibalizing each other. So we try to make sure that every page, again, is uniquely defined into its own intent for that query.
Smart. I love that. You mentioned Schema. Where do you recommend people use Schema? How do they use it? Or do they use plugins if they're on WordPress? Do they go to schema.org and find it themselves? Do they use ChatGPT to spin it up? What do you recommend around Schema?
Yeah, if you're using WordPress, just use the Yoast extension. The guy behind Yoast Schema is Jono Alderson. He's a very clever guy based in the UK, but I don't think he's British. I can't remember where he's from, to be fair. He's based in York. I know that much. So shout out to Jono. But he is obsessive about schema, about implementation, about all these things. So it's the only plugin I've ever used that does schema that doesn't ever break. There is so many plugins that, eventually you need to update it. Eventually something happens, something that the schema just breaks and Google can't validate it. And so this is another thing. When you've implemented your schema, you need to go to validator.schema.org. I need to test if the schema is actually validated by and working in Google. If it's not, you need to fix it. Otherwise, Google's not going to understand and take it into consideration. When you're using schema, we just like to go back to the fact that Google uses consensus, so as a ranking signal. So we just try to use whatever schema everybody else is using. So if in the top 10, 4 of them have got this specific schema, we'll probably use it. But again, if only one of them has got it, unless they're number one, we're not going to probably use that schema, right? So it's very much based on what the SERP has already got and trying to match that. When it comes to schema that is just released, that's when we're doing a lot of testing, seeing if it's seeing if it's a big ranking signal, seeing if it is a ranking signal at all, right? There's some schema that Google implements, but because it's specifically to do with this very niche category, it's not actually a ranking signal. It just shows you an additional SERP feature or something along those lines, right? So we're also trying to test whichever variations Google's constantly updating as well.
Okay. I see. Yeah, you brought up ranking signals. I want to talk about that a little bit because I see a lot of SEOs who focus on stuff that Google says, hey, you need to focus on this, even though it's not a ranking signal. Can you walk through maybe like your, I don't know, top 5 ranking signals that SEOs and business owners like really need to look for, as opposed to like spending energy on areas that Google says work here, but it doesn't actually change your rankings?
Number one, I disagree with Google's entire narrative around putting things like that out, because their other narrative is that every site is unique and that every site needs something unique. So it's either this works for everything, right, which is what they're saying here, or you need to specialize and have everything unique. So they kind of have, but they do it a lot where they have mixed messaging across the board. And that's why site owners and bloggers and things are very confused. And a lot of people are quite upset with Google. Rightfully so. If you were making 100K a month and now you're making $1,000 a month, I would be pretty pissed off too, to be fair. Generally speaking, the top 5 are dependent on how competitive your SERP is.
Okay.
So the more competitive we get, the less on-page matters, because everybody's got the meta titles optimized. Everybody's got the content optimized. Everybody's got 1,000 blog posts on their blog. Everybody's got all this. That's when it starts to come more down to links, to be fair.
Okay.
And when you start getting, if you look at car insurance, for example, very limited reason to do with the on-page of why those sites are ranking. It's mostly to do with links. And there's a reason Geico is like number 1 and State Farm are number 1. Stuff like this. It's all because they're DR90s, not because they're, there's no DR40s ranking for car insurance, basically. So all of those kind of queries, it's just links. When you start dealing with lower competition stuff, that's when it starts to matter more about on-page. Okay. There are some keywords where there are sites ranking and the sites have a Twitter account and a YouTube channel, and that's their entire link profile, right? It's just that they've been creating really, really solid, good piece of content. There's a massively underrated signal, which I'm not too sure where it stacks in like the top list. I don't think anybody really is. And a very large portion of the SEO community, as a direct result of Google's messaging, was saying that it didn't even exist 6 months ago. And that is user engagement signals. So using Chrome data and things like that, because John Mueller last year at a conference, I think it was, I can't remember which conference, I think it was PubCon or SMX. A audience member asked a question, and this is recorded, it's on video, asked a question and basically goes to the point of saying, how much is Chrome data used in Google's ranking signals? And John Mueller replied by laughing the microphone to the audience member and basically accusing them of not knowing what they're talking about and that they don't use the user data.
Yeah.
Forward 6 months later, you have the DOJ saying that they do use it. And then 3 months after that, Google's entire algorithm got leaked, and it turns out it was one of the most important things of their algorithm. So we literally had that engineers saying for like 20 years that it wasn't used at all. They never use any click data. They never use any of this. And it turns out they had entire systems dedicated to it. Like NavBoost was a system just dedicated to user engagement data. I think that's a massive growing signal. And I think as we move more into AI, and as Google gets better at like spam detection and things like that, they will rely more on user engagement signals and data. The problem I have with it as well is that it can be manipulated. And I think actually traffic can be manipulated easier than basically every other metric, because you have to, there are certain systems that Google does to filter out traffic for it to count towards NavBoost. And as a result of all these leaks, we know those exact filters that Google is using. So all we have to do is kind of combine those filters into there are very, I don't want to necessarily get too much into this because I don't want Google clocking on, but there are various ways that you can manipulate that traffic to get Google to count it. And as a result of that, we've been doing a lot of testing. And to be fair, this is one of the things where the French SEO community are massively ahead of basically everybody else. And the French have been manipulating like CTR and user engagement signals and Chrome data for the last year or so. And their community was very, very ingrained in the fact that this is a part of the algorithm. It's usable, it's manipulatable, it's exploitable, all that kind of stuff. And they were basically the only community that was using it last year. As a result of that, they're up here. Everybody else is still trying to figure it out, somewhere down here kind of thing. So I've been learning a lot from the French SEOs recently who actively been doing that. And some of the traffic manipulation numbers that they're doing are absolutely unbelievable. I was thinking, you're going to manipulate like 10,000 visits, and they're like, no, you're going to manipulate 80 million visits.
Wow.
Yeah, like I'm not talking like small numbers.
Oh.
I'm talking there at some serious scale. And I get it. At that point, I think it's just such an overwhelming amount of traffic that Google systems, even if they discount 90% of it, 8 million visits is still going to boost the system anyway. So I also kind of believe in that whole side. In terms of the top 5 rankings, I'm too in my own head about where user engagement signals would end up. And it is very based on competitive keywords versus non-competitive keywords. I would probably go down the route of saying that links is number 1, just because it's root authority beats basically everything. If you're a DR90, you will beat every other site that isn't a DR90, basically. So I would say links number 1. Number 2, you've got content and on-page, because you can rank purely off content and on-page, but you need to be very good at it, and it's only certain niches. Any niches that have got link authority, you don't win in. Number 3, I would probably put internal linking.
Okay.
Number 4, user engagement signals. And then number 5, you're talking additional external factors. So trust signals, social signals, things like that.
Okay. So if I'm a business owner listening to this and I hear you say like in the top 5 is this user engagement signals, what do I do on my site without doing what the French is doing, right? What do I do on my site to keep people there? Like, is it videos? Is it downloads? Is it like, what do I do?
Yeah. So again, it's very niche dependent, right? So it depends on, like, if you're in concrete driveways or something, then there's not much you can do realistically to get that. Unfortunately, people probably don't want to download your brochure on how you made concrete driveways and things, stuff like that. So that stuff is just very difficult. If you're a local small business, ask your friends to Google your company, click on your site, right? Like there's literally the smallest possible things can actually have a boost. And the fact that they're real logged in users in your city, things like that can have an effect as well. So you can start very small. You can get all the way up to what the French are doing, right? I think that realistically, you want to just increase the reasons for people to stay on your site. So in the first place, to increase the amount of time that people spend on your site. And generally the way that you do that is different again, depending on your niche. We like to gamify things.
Okay.
So for example, for example, when people like filling out forms or filling out quizzes or things like that, instead of it just being a list by list by list form, it's more of a game where they have to like drag things over and they have to change things. They have to move things around and you have to click this button, which then leads you to this. And there's like little animations that move things around and stuff. And we found that changing our forms from standard like Google form sheets to that, you increase the engagement with those forms by like 5x. It's like 500% better engagement on those style things, right? Wow. And so stuff like that spread across your site, you should have more and more and more engagement. Unfortunately, there's this big kind of myth going around that like you can just force people to search for your brand out of nowhere. They're like, oh yeah, just build brand power, build brand recognition, build brand authenticity. Well, if you're a small business owner that's just learning SEO, how are you going to build brand searches and brand power out of nowhere? That is a genuinely very hard to do task, to be fair. And I would say it's probably worth your time just spending on other tasks that you know are going to generate you the ROI instead of trying to do things that might work. And actually, because you're not 100% sure and you don't have experience, you don't have data, you don't have knowledge, they might have the opposite effect in the long run. So I would be more wary about trying to do the more advanced things if you are just beginning, and just focus on the stuff that you know is going to actually hit that movement, hit the needle.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any other uncommon tactics that you want to touch on?
I can't think of any at the moment. There's loads of random stuff around like video and stuff like that, and like images, image optimization. People tend to talk about like EXIF data and things like that. We did a load of testing and couldn't really find anything around it. Again, we just like to test things. So if people are saying that X works, then we'll go and do a single variable test times 100 and see if any of them actually gain any results. Normally, most tests don't, to be fair. Yeah. But the tests that do give us some really big insight. And the thing with ongoing testing is that whenever an algorithm update comes around, all you have to do at the end of the algorithm update is see which of your tests shot up, which went to the bottom, and then you know your exact variables have generally been affected by that algorithm update. Yeah. So we know that the last algorithm update had a lot to do with links, had a lot to do with internal linking, had a lot to do with user engagement signals, and didn't have much to do with like content or on page and things like that.
Where do you see the future going in SEO?
That's a difficult question. So, a few years ago, I would have been able to answer very confidently. But these days, just because of the way AI technology is moving, the way the industry is moving, the way that I don't think even Google necessarily knows what's going on with its own company, things like that. It's a pretty worrying time, I think, for a lot of people in SEO. And I would always just go back to adaptability and diversification, right? Those should be the main two strengths of any SEO. And if you have genuinely got those two skills, nothing should really worry you, to be fair. In terms of where I think things are going, I think AI will play a bigger role in terms of AI search will come out. Search GPT is going to come out. AI overviews will get better. Google's hardware will catch up with its software, things like that. That's a lot of the reason like the AI overviews weren't very good, is that they didn't have the chips and the technology and stuff implemented and rolled out in their data centers for them to actually roll out that technology. Originally, AI overviews, when they first came out, you would do a Google search and it would take 16 seconds to generate an AI overview. That was in the closed beta. So you only had like a few thousand users using it. And at any one time, it was probably like, a handful of queries. So I understand that they managed to get that down a lot, and that they're now using caching so that they can get that down to basically 0 for most queries. But the AI reviews aren't that great. And when that hardware does catch up, I think they will get better. They'll roll out more. They'll be heavier and things. I want to see what happens though with the current rollout, because I think there will be lawsuits. And I think that the stuff's going to happen. Brands are pissed off with how the AI reviews is being negative about them. People have been like told to eat rocks and jump off the Golden Gate Bridge and all this kind of stupid stuff with AI. I think eventually there's enough idiots in the world. Somebody is going to listen to the AI overview and they're going to do something stupid, and then Google's going to get sued. So I'm waiting for that to happen and then see the reaction to that lawsuit, because it's going to be a nothing burger and Google are going to just heavily roll out the AI overviews, or it's going to be a game changer and it was going to really hurt their business, and it's going to hurt everybody else's vision, and that will maybe slow down the pace. That's the only thing I think will slow or stop AI in search. In everything else, GPT-5 is probably going to come out in the next couple of months, the next few months. They actually said it might come out next month in October, a couple of releases. It's going to be a video-based model. So we're now going to look at, you can create an hour-long YouTube video with a sentence-long prompt. Like, that's going to be a very different ball game entirely. I think when that next generation of technology comes out, when bigger context windows actually work, when coding with like cursor AI is only in its beta version and things like that, when all of these things start really taking off, I think productivity for individuals who are using it will go up to such an extreme that they'll literally replace people. So I believe that in a year's time, agencies specifically will probably be able to replace entire departments with individuals, right? And that's when I think the hiring scene, the job scene, the economy, everything's going to be very questionable. And that's when you can start talking about politics and universal basic income and all this stupid stuff and things. But we'll just have to wait and see how the rollout happens. Unfortunately, like I said, there's just so much happening and in such a rapid amount of time, and so much has already happened that I wasn't even expecting. When Sora came out, I think it just blew everybody's minds. When the first Sora videos came out, I think nobody expected video AI to be at that level. And I think we're going to see the same thing happen again and again and again. And it's just going to get more rapid. Instead of, Sora being the one thing this year that blew everyone's minds, we're going to start having that happen every quarter, right? It's just going to be new technology blowing everyone's minds every quarter. And that disruption will be the biggest problem for most agencies and most SEOs and most people, in my opinion.
Yeah, some scary times and some exciting times combined, right?
Yeah, 100%.
A little bit of the unknown. Well, Charles, I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on and chat with us today. I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate you jumping on with us.
Yeah, I appreciate having me. It was an awesome episode.
Yeah. And to everyone else listening out there, we'll talk to you guys next week.